What era is this? Do you focus on any particular decade?
Honestly, no. I kind of just I'm a very how could I put it? Maybe bohemian collector in that I just collect the things that speak to me.
Hmm.
There's no particular um like I don't discriminate era. A lot of my collection is probably predominantly between the 50s and early 70s. But I mean, I've been a collector my whole life, so I still have a couple of collections from when I was a kid. Like I still have all My Little Ponies, so those are the 80s and early 90s. Um and I have a lot of like random oddities. I have a number of things that I don't even post to my Instagram. So like I've got, a lot of weird oddities and stuff like that too. So I have like a turn of the century last rites kit, and I've got a death mask from the turn of the 20th century. I've got all kinds of random stuff. So it really is just, what speaks to me.
You have a maudlin edge, huh? You like some of
Yeah,
the dark
yeah.
macabre
Yeah,
stuff?
there's like all of the really rainbowy stuff is the
Uh-huh.
stuff that makes it to Instagram typically, but it's also the stuff that's like out. I mean, I started the Instagram page um it was late like fall of 2020,
Uh-huh.
and I was just, as most of us were, very depressed, had a ton of anxiety due to the pandemic and lots of other things. And I was a full-time student in the beginning of the pandemic, juggling multiple part-time jobs, and just like really doing a lot of like death scrolling online, and just like just super bummed out all the time. I mean, I was basically just in my house doing nothing but reading the news and freaking out. And
Yeah.
so
That's not a good
I
mix, especially living
no,
in Connecticut where it can get dismal part of the year, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was actually, I think it was August of 2020. It was August or September of 2020 that I started my um Instagram specifically for vintage stuff. I was like, you know what? I'm spending a lot of time on Instagram just focusing on like social justice issues, and just being really stressed out a lot. How about I stop the doom scrolling, and I will start an Instagram page that is just about, like Pyrex and the vintage stuff that I like, and I will only follow other vintage accounts, and so my feed will be like less aggressive. And
Right.
so
Right. You got to watch
um
out for that stuff because you can
yeah,
gradually fall into a reality tunnel based on what you're looking at online. And you can only see that as the world around you. Now, the world around, definitely going through a moment in time,
yeah,
but there is, it's okay to have outlets. It's okay to find happiness and meaning and fulfillment where you can, as long as it's, I don't even want to put rules on it, but if it's positive and it makes you feel good and it makes your outlook on life better, I think that's fantastic.
absolutely. And I think it's very important for people to be aware of what's going on in the world, and simultaneously I'm not sure that evolutionarily the human brain was meant to have the capacity to consume uh sorrows outside of our own,
Mhm.
immediate social circle,
I'm
or
following. Yeah.
or our immediate, community.
Yeah.
And having this like constant barrage online of things that are happening in other regions of our country, or even, around the world. Like, I think it's important to be informed, and simultaneously you definitely have to have this for your own mental and emotional health. There has to be like a cutoff, or a delineation of like, okay, I'm done for the day. And like,
Yeah.
I was not doing that for the vast majority of the beginning of 2020. And I mean, I still find myself, slipping down that rabbit hole every once in a while, but like that was the impetus for
Yeah.
this social media was, all right, well, I'm just going to do, a feed full of bright, happy, rainbowy things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was that.
So, well, first, did it help?
Yeah, I would say that it did. I mean, the world's still pretty screwed up. So,
Yeah.
it's still a real big bummer being a human these days. But yeah,
Right.
yeah, I would say it helped a little bit. Yeah, for sure.
Do you think there's something to the fact that you're kind of looking to the past?
Well, it's interesting. I think so. But I I have this hashtag that I mean, I have it up on my profile, like in the little blurb about me in my profile. And then I also put it on every single um post that I do, which is vintage style, not vintage values.
Yeah, I saw that.
And
I wanted to get to that.
yeah, that's really important to me. I mean, wait, can I swear? I have the mouth of a trucker, so I
Yeah,
just want to make
of
sure.
course,
Okay,
please.
okay, all right,
Yeah.
all right, cool.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to, go off.
No, you're good.
I was a professional tattooer for 10 years, and now I tend bar. I have other jobs where I have to keep it chill, but in social settings, I tend to let things slip.
Go for it.
But yeah, so I mean, the unfortunately, we're seeing this resurgence of these really shitty vintage values, let's say.
Mhm.
We're seeing like a lot of, or maybe it's more aware to us. It's not like it ever went away, but it's more aware mainstream than it had been for a long time. And that's thankfully, I guess, due to social media putting a spotlight on it. But there's a lot of like racism and sexism and homophobia and all these terrible shitty things going on. And so I think that there's a drive in the vintage community to very specifically tie a bow on the fact that like we love the stylistically or artistically the design, the heart that went into these items. And simultaneously we understand that like I think it's drawing a line between like I'm not saying, oh, the good old days, like the good old days were not great for a lot of fucking people. So
Right.
like I like that's the important line that I feel like I'm drawing with that vintage style and that vintage values. I love the way these things look. I think
Mhm.
they're gorgeous. I think that in modern design, whether it be clothing or household items or toys or advertising, like there's such a cheapening in modern design.
Mhm.
And there was just something so absolutely gorgeous about all of those different things in like the 30s through 70s in particular, like just like the advertising of like the 30s, 40s, 50s, gorgeous, but like I'm not pining to I'm not one of those people who would ever say, oh, I was born in the wrong era. Like shit's fucked up right now, but I don't want to live in the 50s.
Right.
Like it was
Right.
worse then.
Yes. Right.
So yeah, so that's definitely, I think for me, so I mentioned that I was a professional tattooer for 10 years, and I have this tendency to look at everything and anything man-made through the eyes of what was the person thinking, feeling when they designed it.
Uh-huh.
And so every object is a work of art. Some of them suck, but every single object is some
Uh-huh.
kind of work of art because somebody had to design it, whether they were thinking of it artistically or not. And I do feel as though there was a lot more heart or thought put into the designs of bygone eras than there are now.
It's almost like a
You
craftsmanship thing, right? Like
yeah,
it's not so
absolutely.
mass produced. Now there's huge
Mhm.
factories pumping this stuff out. And, there were definitely factories back then, but it's the quantities were smaller. The hands on it, there were probably fewer. I mean, I could be, talking out of school here, but that's the impression that I get. The level of craftsmanship, like even like signage was more, it had more of a hand feel because it probably was printed by hand and illustrated by hand first. And there were a lot few obviously computers have a lot to do with it, but the volume was a lot less, and the numbers of I guess hands that it went through were actually, it went through more hands as opposed to automation. Maybe that has something to do with it. I'm not sure.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, perhaps. Yeah, that there was more human input maybe than there is now. Or also too, I do feel as though, and I'm gonna sound like such an old man saying this, but like things back then were built to last.
Uh-huh.
Whereas so much about everything made today is a combination of how can we make this as cheaply as possible to boost profit margins and simultaneously like planned obsolescence.
Yeah.
And so like if everything is made for the greatest amount of profit margin and simultaneously, well, if it only lasts 6 months, then they got to buy another one in 7 months. So I think that if that's the way most things are being manufactured, then heart and soul is not being poured into it either. I tend to have this like a bit of an animist philosophy to things too. Like I definitely do uh almost it's silly to say out loud, but it's kind of almost like a Toy Story-esque, like
Like it has a life to it, a spirit. Yeah.
yes, the more that something is cared about, the more that something is planned and loved, that it has it like almost like develops its own soul. I have this hard time. So on these make it onto my Instagram a lot. I tend to collect a lot of like vintage stuffed animals and squeak toys and stuff like that. And I think that there's an anthropomorphizing of things with a face in particular. Like I have a hard time if something is like particularly adorable, leaving it behind at the flea market. Or like there was my husband and I went to the Elephant's Trunk Flea Market, which is a big flea market here in Connecticut. And we went on my birthday last month, and we were walking around, and I got a really cool piece of Pyrex that's pretty rare, and I got it for a good price. And I got another piece of Pyrex, and then I got this like, it's a mohair tiger, and you turn its tail counterclockwise, and it's a music, like a little music box. Cool. And it's like full of stuff, like sawdust. And I mean, there were other toys there that I walked by, but this was in a booth that was nothing but furniture, and then this random little, it's like this big. And I just, he was $5, and I was like, yeah, he's coming home. And my husband just like shook his head, and he's like, yeah, I kind of figured. Like I can't leave the idiot tiger. He's got to come with us. So
what strikes me about your collection too is the condition of these things. I have seen a lot of these kind of I'm just going to throw like a blanket term, like Cupid doll style toys, or these vintage style dolls. I've seen a lot of those before, but every time I've seen them in thrift stores, they're mangled, they're matted, they're in horrible condition. You have been able to find these things in pretty good, if not pristine condition. How? What's your criteria? Like, is it just is it just kind of the community in Connecticut? There's a lot of collectors there maybe that kept that stuff, or how have you tracked this stuff down? Because I haven't seen stuff like this in this sort of condition.
Well, thank you, firstly. But I think it's probably a number of factors. So, first of all, I mean, I'm 37 now. I've been collecting my whole life. And when I was younger, I would kind of just like collect like everything that spoke to me would come home with me. And very
toys.
Yeah, toys, like all the things that, and so I would have much more of the like missing arms, and I definitely do have some things still that are like missing arms, or there's an eye gone or whatever, but like yeah, I have sort of tried to narrow my field first of all as a collector over the years, because to speak to the name of your podcast, I'm not running out of space. I have run out of space.
Yeah.
We have a very small cottage, and we're actually in the process of like trying to overhaul the house and to make it more livable, because our plan was to buy a house this year, but the housing market is an absolute nightmare. So that has to be put off. And so we're trying to make, my husband's a collector too in a very different way, so we're trying to make the house work a little bit better. And actually, I'm in the middle of planning a flea market that's going to be this coming Sunday. So I'm hoping to get rid of a bunch of stuff on Sunday. But yeah, so I think, just the fact that I've sort of narrowed my field of vision of what I collect. I'm more uh, you know, picky, more choosy on the things that I buy. But then also too, yeah, I would say regionally, New England is sort of known for, old people. And so I guess, I don't know, that's my view of New England is there's a lot of older people here.
Are
And
the
it's,
consignment shops really good out there?
yeah, they're pretty good. I mean, the thrift stores are pretty good. Estate sales are pretty good. Everything has dried up a little bit throughout the pandemic because there's a lot more people out of
Uh-huh.
work and decided to move to, secondhand selling and stuff like that. So it's a
Yeah.
little bit harder as a collector. But yeah, I think that also too, I've found that in other parts of the country, things are either not as old just because those areas of the country were colonized later than
Okay.
New England.
Okay.
New England tends to have a lot of much older stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think, especially in like the South, I've heard a lot of people say that like a lot of things don't last as long just because of like the weather, like the
Yes.
humidity. So it's definitely, I think that that's probably part of it too. Yeah, I've just become pickier as I've gotten older. Because I don't have any space left. So
Yeah.
I
Where you're
even
paying.
yeah, even with Pyrex, I mean, it used to be any piece that was within my budget, which my budget has grown a little bit for Pyrex just because the Pyrex market has, just like with everything throughout the pandemic, Pyrex collecting has really taken off. And so there are pieces that were well under $100 or within the $100 range for Pyrex pre-pandemic that are now like pushing hundreds, if not thousands of dollars.
Can we enter that zone right now? Can I go into
Yeah,
the Pyrex zone?
absolutely.
So I had no idea that this culture existed, but it makes total sense because there are so many variations. There are so many sizes. There are so many color patterns and just so much delight. Like just looking at some Pyrex dishes, you're probably thinking of the dishes that would come out or served in those. So like, how do how did that interest? How did you find that interest? Like how did you even kind of have the sensibility of, oh, I'm gonna collect something that is usually served for practical reasons?
Yeah. So well, it's funny too, because in my house, I'm not the cook. My husband's the cook.
Huh?
And so it makes it that much funnier that like I collect vintage kitchenware, and there's a lot of it now, especially where the prices have really jacked up. There's a lot of pieces that I have that are pretty rare that I'm like, you can't cook with that. Don't cook with that.
Right.
That stays on the shelf. So when I was a kid, my mom had okay, so yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's in frame. Okay, so this set right here,
Uh-huh.
this set right here is called the primary set, even though green's not a primary color. But yeah, so this is called the primary set. This shape, the mixing bowl shapes without the handles, those are the 400s. That was like the series, like the
Uh-huh.
serial number on the base of the bowl. And so it's 404, 403, 402, and 401. And the blue 401s, my mom had four of those. And so there's a big thing, like all of these different colored Pyrex patterns, they all came out pre-dishwashers. And so they're not dishwasher safe. And so in that like sort of time period in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, when people still had these Pyrex pieces, but they then had a dishwasher, these workhorse pieces in the kitchen would then get thrown in the dishwasher. And it's called for short, it's DWD, it's dishwasher damage
Uh-huh.
in the Pyrex community.
Right.
And so my mom, these blue bowls, she had four, and they were her like cereal bowls.
Uh-huh.
And I mean they were so badly dishwasher damaged. And I just like I have a very like I am on no contact with my mom. She's a very toxic person. I don't have her in my life anymore. But like my concept, my idea of her eating cereal out of these bowls is from like a time period before I realized how toxic she was and that I didn't want her in my life. And so I was very young. And my parents had gotten divorced when I was 10. And then back in my father has now passed away. He passed away in 2017, but back in 2015, he had been diagnosed with dementia. And so I had to go down to Florida and move him into a nursing home. And
Mhm.
so it was very traumatic, and going through his house and, getting everything out. And at that point, I had Pyrex was on my radar, and I had a couple of pieces in the house, about probably for a few years at that point, but I wasn't a hardcore collector yet. And I don't think I even really knew what they were. They were just kind of sitting hanging out, that had been handed down to me from other random people throughout the years. And then I found these blue bowls that had been my mom's cereal bowls, but they were in my dad's cabinets. And so clearing out my dad's apartment, found these bowls, and they were so dishwasher damaged. I still have them. They're now workhorses in my kitchen.
Yeah.
And then I just something, even though I already had these pieces in my house, these four pieces, something about them made me like look into Pyrex. And then
Yeah.
when I started looking online and saw these beautiful patterns, and then started like every time I have ADHD, and every time that's probably one of many reasons why I'm a collector, is my ADHD, is that like I find something interesting and then I fixate on it,
Mhm.
and I have to learn everything there is about it.
Yes. Yes.
And so I pretty quickly started learning everything there was to know about it. And back then in 2015, it was still, I mean, you can still find Pyrex in the thrift stores. You can still find it at the flea market, at estate sales, but it is definitely much more competitive. Throughout the pandemic, it has become super popular to collect Pyrex. Because unfortunately, I know I'm part of the problem. Like, people like me who have these Instagrams with all of these beautiful pieces of Pyrex, and then these people like this, the community has become full of these people who have, it seems, just unlimited amounts of money.
Yeah.
And so they come in and they're buying these super rare pieces for whatever they're listed on eBay,
Yes.
regardless.
Yes.
And they're like artificially inflating the market.
Yes.
And
That's
so
just
for,
endemic of collecting. Like every collector
yeah,
is like that.
that's fair.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's funny because, since I've had this Instagram for like close to 2 years now, I have seen these Instagrams pop up where people are like, oh, I just started collecting, and they've got these crazy rare pieces I could never dream of owning, and they've got like a whole room that's nothing but a Pyrex room.
Wow.
I'm like, how did you, are you a billionaire? Are you like a trust fund? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So yeah, so
And
I
by the way, you can kind of weed those sort of collectors out when you get to talking with them. Like, just hearing your story, your connections to Pyrex, it makes sense. There's a spirit, there's a vibe and an energy behind what you're doing.
Oh, thanks.
But what my you're quite welcome. But my point is that when you speak with some of these people that are just buying, and they're not taking the time to hunt down, they're not necessarily taking the time to embed themselves in the community and understand why these pieces are important, you can kind of see how, I guess, the wind in the sails kind of vacuums out in terms of the wow factor of their collection. Then you just see it as, oh, well, this person just had a bunch of money, so they just bought like the dope pieces. Like, there was no kind of spirit of the hunt for them. They just wanted to have it, and they could afford it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's what really hooked me with Pyrex. And I mean, generally, what kind of hooks me with like a lot of the things that I collect in general is the thrill of the hunt. And so,
Yes.
I basically, so I had like cleared out my dad's whole apartment, and I had come back home to Connecticut, and there were key pieces that I had kept from my dad's apartment, like his favorite piece of art, I've got up on my wall. And but these four, beat to shit pieces of Pyrex
Mhm.
came home, and like I said, they're still in my cupboards. And I decided, like, there there was something about it that I just decided I'm going to collect Pyrex.
Yeah.
And I had been going to flea markets and yard sales since I was a kid. And, I loved like vintage stores and antique malls and stuff like that. And, I went to a yard sale, and I found, the, I don't have any in here. So the mixing bowls, so these, like I said, these are the 400 set. And then there's other mixing bowl sets that have like a handle on one side and like a pour spout on the other. And those are 440 sets. And those are called Cinderella bowls. Like that's the general term for them, or the Cinderella bowls. And there's a pattern, a very highly sought after pattern called gooseberry. And the most popular gooseberries are pink. I don't have a lot of pink in my collection because they're highly sought after, and I tend to cap myself on what I'm going to spend, because I'm a normal human being and I don't have a trust fund for
Right.
Pyrex. But I found, though, the very first time I went out, specifically in my head, I'm looking for Pyrex, and I went to a yard sale and I found the smallest bowl of a Cinderella set would be the 441 of gooseberries. There's an alternative pattern. Rather than being pink and white, it's black and white, and then every other bowl is sort of like a butter yellow with black pattern
Nice.
on it. And it's just such a cool, and I think underrated, alternative pattern, because everybody goes apeshit about the pink, which the pink is great. I love the pink, but I was just immediately hooked right there. And it was $1 and it was in amazing condition. And I was like, all right, well, here we go. I collect Pyrex now. And pretty quickly, like I think one of the things that hooked me so much was that it was really something beautiful that really spoke to me, had a ton of variation, and simultaneously it was pretty easy to get your hands on, like pretty easy to find in the wild, which that's what I find the most exciting. So I'm high risk. I live with leukemia. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, honestly, up until we had vaccines, like I was really nervous. Like I barely left the house. And that was one of the many things that was contributing to my anxiety, for sure. I'm generally speaking a pretty social person and a pretty outgoing person. So to go from being social and outgoing, full-time student, multiple part-time jobs, and then suddenly I'm just in my house all the time, like that was a bummer. And so during that time period, I did start doing some like eBay shopping for things just to like get that fix a little bit. But I still, I would say pre-pandemic, my budget for a Pyrex piece would be like no more than $20. Like it had to, like, and ideally like $10 or under. And I would, be looking at stuff specifically at like flea markets, thrift stores, estate sales. And then now, since the prices have gone up so much, now my budget is more like, all right, between $20 and $50. And I'm being more discerning about the pieces that I find. Whereas before I would just, take in all of, like, it was like a Pyrex orphanage. I just take in all of the pieces I found, no matter what. And I'm like, all right, I already have that. I don't need that. I'll leave that for somebody else. And I will take only the pieces that I find exciting.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, just looking behind you, the shelf appeal is astonishing.
Oh, thank you. I actually just put this together recently because like I said, we're redoing the house. So
it looks great. And maybe there's something too, like with collecting Pyrex, that there's almost like a sense of home, not in the sense of the past, but in the sense of that, the feeling that that you're somewhere safe with it. Like I immediately kind of feel comfortable around it.
Yeah, I think, so many people have this, I think there's a sense of community, because I think it was being utilized a lot back when it was still very common for families to gather around a dinner table. And maybe, multiple generations were getting together more so than they are these days. And You know, it was the kind of thing where like everybody's grandparents had Pyrex in the house. You know,
Yes.
everybody's mom or
Yes.
aunt or, you know, uncle had Pyrex, had Fire King. These were the items that they remember, like casseroles coming out, you know, to the kitchen table for Thanksgiving and stuff like that. And so I think it gives a sense of, yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, like a warm fuzzy nostalgic feeling for sure.
But I mean, also, I mean, I'm more talking about the idyllic sense. I didn't grow up
Mm-hmm.
like that. Much like yourself, my parents are very divorced.
I like that. Yeah.
My relationship with my mom is complicated.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really have the Pyrex experience. I see it more as like a something that like it's almost like the fantasy of a stable childhood,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
fantasy of a stable home. Um, that's
absolutely.
how I see, I guess, how if I'm gonna dig deeper, that's kind of how
Yeah.
I see Pyrex because
I
I didn't really have that stuff. We moved around a lot. My parents, they weren't really collectors. Um, and I feel like that's kind of how I got into collecting because I'm a collector my whole life, and I feel that I've come to kind of self-diagnose in myself in the sense that I think I collect things because I'm attempting to establish roots.
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
want to burden myself with things that I have to take to, you know, what if I move. I subconsciously want to burden myself with things so that I have a responsibility to take them somewhere. I'm firmly rooted, and it's almost like something a permanence that I'm self-imposing on myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of how I see
Yeah.
collecting, you know?
No, I think you really hit on something for sure there. So yeah, so my when growing up, it was just me and my mom and my dad, and that was it. I had no extended family. Oh, I have a cat trying to get my attention. All right, I know. Go away. So yeah, I it was just me, my mom, and my dad, and that was it. And we moved around a lot. When my parents got divorced when I was 10, we had lived in like 9 different places all over Florida. I grew up in Florida.
Oh, where
And
from? Where from?
so we moved around a lot. When I was really little, outside of Miami, we lived in Old Homestead for a little
Uh-huh.
while.
Before
But
Andrew?
yes, before Andrew. When Andrew hit, I was in Delray Beach.
Were you born in Florida?
No. So I was actually it was TMI, but I was conceived in Florida and then born in Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
And then my parents moved back to Florida.
Mm.
I lived in so I was born in 1985 at the height of satanic panic.
Yep.
And there was like this rumor going around that could not possibly be true, but my mom, I remember my mom telling me this when I was a kid, the reason why they left Colorado was supposedly that the child disappearance rate in Colorado was 1 a day. And I'm like, well,
Right.
there'd be no children left. Like
Right.
how on earth? So and then they so my parents before I was born, they were dog breeders. Actually, they bred show dogs, and then they stopped when I was born. But they had this farm outside of Denver, Colorado, and supposedly when they moved into the farm, they like there was a little shed on the property that had like little animal bones and satanic designs on the floor. And I'm like, I think that's probably bullshit, or was some kid screwing around? Like
Right.
either
Right.
way,
Yeah.
you know.
But it's funny that your parents moved you to Florida to evade child kidnapping when at the time, like the most famous child kidnapping in the nation, Adam Walsh, happened in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
Yep.
that's kind of that's funny.
It is, you know, very much so, because there are a lot of different things, not to, you know, deviate too far from, you know, collecting in general, but like one of the many things that I have you know, an interest in, not so much collecting wise, but more just like an interest in consuming information on, is true crime.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of that definitely comes from being exposed to a number of different crazy things when I was really young. And,
Yes.
like Adam Walsh for sure,
Yeah.
was a big one. And then, this isn't a true crime podcast, so I won't go too far into it. But when I was little, we lived in a lot of different like condominium complexes,
Uh-huh.
and we lived in a condominium complex where we shared walls with this guy and his wife and their baby, and he and his baby would like hang out on the lawn. And I was probably 6 or 7, and I and some of the other neighborhood kids would come around and like sit with him and the baby and stuff. And then one day we came home and our like shared parking lot was full of cops, and it turned out that he turned himself in. He had been killing sex workers when his like wife and child would go visit her parents. And like,
Wow.
and my dad was one of these people with like no filter. He would just tell me, he'd be like, oh yeah, well, turned out, like I'm
Yes.
like 7 or whatever. And I'm like, what happened?
Yeah.
And he was dumping their bodies in our shared dumpster that we dumped our trash in. Like,
Wow.
and he probably would have never gotten caught, because what the lesser dead,
Yeah.
they were sex workers. And so, like he probably would have never gotten caught if he had a guilty conscience and he,
Uh-huh.
turned himself in. And so, they moved from Colorado
Yeah.
to
Right.
Southern Florida.
Homestead. Yeah. The swamp.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
it makes perfect sense why you would collect last rites and death masks. Like if guys all come full circle, I get it. There's
Yeah.
just that
Yeah, for
exposure. When you're
sure.
exposed to that sort of thing, it leaves an imprint. And
Yeah.
it might not necessarily, it's not an imprint necessarily where it becomes a odd obsession or like an aberration, but it's just something that when you're exposed to things, you know them, or you become
Well,
acquainted
yeah.
with them, and there's something there's some connection that's made. So it makes sense that you
Yeah.
would collect things like that too.
Absolutely. I think, a lot of at least for women, I feel like I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts and stuff like that. And I do feel like a lot of women who are like really hyper fixated on like true crime and stuff like that. It's this wanting to know the limits of like uh human portrayed evils, and or wanting to know as much as there is to know about a thing in order to avoid being the victim of that thing. And
Yeah.
so it's definitely having been exposed to that at such a young age. And this was again a guy, like I would sit down on the blanket that he would put out when play with his baby, like
Yeah.
I knew that guy. I don't know his name, which is messed up because it happened, and it was, that's just being Florida. Unfortunately, you try to find serial killer who was killing sex workers in Southern Florida in the 90s, and there are way too many of them. And I was 7, and now my father's passed away, and I don't speak to my mom, and I don't know if they ever knew his name to begin with. And so, I mean, that's just kind of like lost to history, maybe, unless I really did a deep dive to like find out who that guy was. But
Honestly, as sad and as depressing as it seems, it's just another Florida man.
yeah,
Florida
man,
is
right?
full of
Yeah.
crazy loonies somehow.
Yeah.
It spawns this kind of
Mhm.
bizarre behavior with people that goes too far and becomes savage, and
Yeah.
it's
And simultaneously,
real.
interestingly, so what you were saying earlier, this actually hooks back in an interesting way to, you were saying earlier that like, you didn't have the kind of childhood that it's like these like false memories that Pyrex like brings up. It's like these idyllic memories that aren't yours, that like, oh yeah, that's comforting in a way that I didn't know. And I think I feel that way too about a lot of these things. And so my parents, got divorced when I was 10. My mom and I moved up to Massachusetts, to the town that she had grown up in. And there's a cat. Okay. I gotta move some shit so he doesn't knock anything over. I know logically, the logic side of my brain knows that Florida is fucking wild, like you were just saying. But simultaneously, there's like this false nostalgia for, I think, a Florida that never really was.
Mhm.
In that I love that. I think it was a lot of like travel and a lot of like tourism things that were put out about Florida, the idyllic, like the flamingos, and like there aren't
Sure.
flamingos in Florida, and except in very, very small areas in like the Keys and shit.
Yes.
Like
Sure.
there aren't hibiscus flowers in Florida unless they were planted there and they're maintained. Like Florida is a gross mosquito filled swamp. Like Florida is not a paradise. And yet there's these, I mean, I've got, it's out of frame, but so I like the pennants and stuff. Like, so I've got pennants from a lot of like travel places, and I've got like a Daytona Beach one up there that has like people hang gliding, and like it's all these really bright colors, and there's a flamingo and some hibiscuses, and it's this very idyllic view of Florida I think of Florida that doesn't really exist and never did.
Right.
And I love that shit.
Yes.
Like I love oranges and like, like I'm not huge on Disney in general, but like I like the orange bird. Like I think the orange bird is so cute. And that harkens back to that like that 1950 style of advertisement too.
Yeah.
And so
Souvenirs.
that like ties in as well. Yes.
Florida is it's best viewed through a souvenir.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And there's a dearth of them. There's like, it's just endless souvenirs. It's almost a way to track the history of Florida. California is a little like that. Florida is very specific in the sense of souvenirs. You can really track the history of the state through them, because now they're just cheap and like mass produced, but like, there is definitely a vibe. I can imagine your Daytona pennant,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I've got another one, like a little St. Augustine one, although that one's a little more morbid. It's a little one, and there's like an alligator on it. It says man eater underneath. And it just said St. Augustine, Florida. I'm like, I don't know if anybody ever got eaten by an alligator in St. Augustine, but
they're like, that's the Civil War reenactment spot, right? That's St. Augustine. I heard actually St. Augustine has blown up, like in a good way.
Yeah, they've got like that Spanish fortress right there on the coast. Yeah, that's very north eastern coast of Florida.
If somebody that you just met asked you how to describe your collection, what would you say? How do you kind of encompass this? What's the vibe, or what is kind of the aesthetic?
I would say probably eclectic mid-century pop culture. I think maybe, or maybe that's not quite right, because I mean I do have like a lot of the like toys, and I mean I've got like we were saying before, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make it to the Instagram grid. Like I've got like some Star Trek toys, and I have a huge Star Wars collection, but that's definitely not mid-century. Now we're talking 70s 80s, but yeah, it's so tough. I'm not sure that I could put a label on it. Because I have this idealistic this idea in my head of what I would like our future house to be when we finally, hopefully next year, buy a house, of like the very mid-century Pyrex Fire King kitchen, and then like the like Danish mid-century modern living room. And my ideal would be, I would absolutely love to have a basement rec room where I could put all of my like 80s 70s 80s 90s like horror and sci-fi, and like all of our I still have my Atari from when I was a kid, and my NES and my SNES. I've got like a pretty big video game. Again, these are collections that like don't even make it onto the grid.
You don't stop. Everything for you, right? Anything that you're interested in, you dive right into, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been it's having ADHD. It's like I go through like phases, but then I tend to, it's not so much I get over a phase, because I don't want to get rid of any of that stuff, and I still enjoy it. It's just that like that's not the thing that is like currently taking up space in the front of my brain.
You have to prioritize.
So like exactly. So I've got like I have a decent sized comic book collection. I haven't actively collected comics in a few years now, but I've got some CG Seed stuff. I've got a lot of I really like dinosaurs. For me, Jurassic Park came out when I was 8, so like Jurassic Park was like my version of Star Wars. Like that was I went and saw it in the drive-in with my mom. So even pre Jurassic Park though, like I had tons of like dinosaurs all over the house, and so I have like a ton of like comic books related to dinosaurs too. And yeah, so I would just love like the media basement,
Yes.
where it's like the basement rec room where all of the more modern pop culture could come into play. And then like it'd be cool to have the like the creepy, oddities den,
Yes.
like, and that's where like the human skull and the last rites box and all of the like weird. I'm vegetarian, but I really enjoy taxidermy, so like
Uh-huh.
that's a weird,
Yeah.
how do I but all of the weird creepy stuff. And then also too, again, like you brought up earlier, like I love the holidays too. I love Halloween is my favorite holiday, and I've been getting into Christmas more and more lately because I've just been embracing the things that I like about Christmas. So
Sure.
usually creepier
Yep.
Christmas, like the
Creepy Christmas is
unsettling
good.
Christmas.
That's a good
Like,
hashtag.
yeah. So like I love the, like, so one big thing that I'm really into lately is like the stuffed rubber face Santas
Hmm.
from like the 50s that are
Yes.
really fucking unsettling. And they
Yes.
usually, I'm a huge sucker for like the 1940s 1950s, like Max Fleischer style, like pie cut eyes, like
Uh-huh.
anything with like a like the
Yes.
eyes looking off to the side. It kills me. I love it so much. So like a lot of those, actually both Halloween and Christmas items have that kind of like look to them where they're just very creepy.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's my ideal is having the, so a lot of the Halloween stuff though stays up like all year round. Like I've got a couple of, just off camera, I've got a couple of the like paper pulp jack-o'-lanterns, and
Uh-huh.
there's a rubber face devil over there. And
Do you collect any of those like costumes that we I'm a little older than you, but I remember the costumes with like the rubber band and like it was just a smock. Do you collect any of those?
I have a couple. I
Those go
actually
for a
can
lot of
see.
money. I've actually looked
Yeah,
on eBay. They like if you can find a mint in box,
yeah, yeah.
they go for a good chunk of change.
Yeah. Oh God, why am I blanking on his name?
There's a
Cooper. His
name.
last name's Cooper.
Yes.
Oh, what the fuck is
The
his first
worst. The
name?
rubber band would snap and
Yep. And I always loved too that it was like inexplicably, instead of the smock being the character's outfit, it
right.
would be then a picture of the character. Like, why would I be the character and then I'm wearing a picture of myself too? That makes no sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I don't have I don't really get into those because again, that's in that territory of they take up a lot of space and they're fragile.
Yes.
And I know that that's just like a wormhole that I don't want to go down because of the lack of space.
And the boxes were paper. Like you can't stack
Mhm.
those. Like they'll be crushed,
Mm.
and then it's the
Yes.
point.
And the masks, you know what? I'm gonna go grab. I got two masks. I don't have
Cool.
full, but I've got two masks. I'll go grab really
Cool.
quick. So this is a
That's awesome.
leopard, but like look, like it's so fragile. Like
Yeah.
the plastic is just like
Mhm.
very,
Mhm.
split all around the edges. I
Yeah.
mean the rubber band is long since gone.
Yep.
And then I've got a Huckleberry Hound,
Great. You
and
got good
again,
ones.
yeah, the plastic is just like they're just so fragile. Everything about them is fragile. I mean, the smock, they get to the point where they're brittle,
Yes.
and the cardboard's brittle, and the
They're
plastic mask is
literally
brittle.
rotten. They rot those things.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, for sure. So I mean, it's the kind of thing where oh I so I'm sure, I mean, you interview all kinds of people, collecting all kinds of things. And I remember watching this documentary one time on sneaker collectors, and like these sneaker collectors where in I think they were in South America, and so it was very humid, and their collections that are worth so much money are just literally rotting.
They crumble.
And like
Yes.
there's so much anxiety in that for me. Like I do kind of keep that in mind too when I have a hard time with ephemera. I love ephemera because again, I'm a big sucker for like stylistically, design wise, those like vintage advertisements. Like I'm a big sucker for like a good like for instance like Christmas light boxes. That's another thing that I have tried really hard to not get into. There are so many people on like Instagram and stuff that like have these massive collections of like the string light boxes of Christmas, and like they've got these gorgeous graphics on them. And it's like I can't start collecting cardboard boxes, like
Right.
old ass
Right.
cardboard boxes.
Yes.
I actually have a stack right now of vintage board games that I'm like, I gotta get these out of my life. Like
Yeah.
I can't. I've got a Operation from 1965, and I'm like, that's so cool. I gotta get it out of here. Like I can't. I can no longer be the guardian of this item because it's
Yes.
gonna kill me to watch it degrade over time.
There's a fine line where you're really hoarding. I mean, in a way, collecting is hoarding, and that's a wonderful thing. But then there's the
Yeah.
fine line of not only hoarding, but I talk about this with other guests. You're just collecting inventory at a certain point.
Yes, yes, which is also why I have never, well, I can't say that. I was gonna say this is why I've never gotten into reselling, but I did own a vintage store. I own and ran a vintage store for very, very short period of time, like 6 months, like 10 years ago.
Cool.
And but I still, there's a few things that have been kicking around since then that it's like, well, I don't want to just donate it, because I could sell it for something, and simultaneously I don't really want it and I don't have the space for it. And so yeah, these are the things I'm trying to purge myself of right now. But I have lots of friends on, that I've made in the vintage Instagram community, who are resellers, and they've got what they call death piles, that's the pile of stuff, because it's so much fun to go out and get inventory
Yes.
and find the fun things, but then processing it all and actually like putting it up on, Etsy or eBay or whatever. And I know, again, my ADHD does not allow me to do something as tedious as online selling. I just absolutely can't. And that was
Yes.
actually like the impetus for me like creating this flea market at the brewery that I work at. I was like, I know I'll never sell on eBay. I'll never make myself do it.
You
And
get
I
so
also,
worn out. You
yeah,
get ground to dust on eBay.
yes, absolutely. Just writing the small nick in the upper
Yes.
left hand side, and
Yes.
please message with more questions. Like I can't, I
Yes.
fucking can't, man. Like
Yeah.
I just don't want to.
Yes. I have a bag of vintage t-shirts that I want to get rid of, but like I just don't want to deal with eBay. Like I'm just putting it off and off, and every time I look at it, I'm just like I get sad and I get anxiety every time I look at it.
Yep.
So I feel
Yeah.
you.
My husband is a collector in a very different way than me, which just adds to the whole thing. I mean, we have a storage unit, because he's a professional in the beer industry.
Awesome.
He's one of the founding brewers of the brewery that I work at
Nice.
periodically. And he has like getting into the industry, so more than 10 years ago, like he was a beer collector. I mean, this man has he has bottles of beer from Princess Diana's wedding. Like,
Wow. That's
just
cool.
has, yeah, yes, except that we're doing nothing with it. And
Right.
like it's like in a storage unit, and
Right.
like he was giving me shit yesterday. He was like, there's these pieces of Pyrex on the kitchen counter that aren't doing anything, and they're kind of in the way. And I was like, Tony, there's pieces of Pyrex all over the house.
And it looks
I
so
don't-
good, right? It looks perfect. I'll bet it looks perfect where it is. I get it. What is it about some of these things? You touched on this earlier when we were talking about your seasonal decorations. Why is it that some of these statuettes and some of these pieces from 50s and 60s are unintentionally sinister? Why do we look at them now and they look creepy? Like there's definitely a Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet quality
Oh yeah.
to the stuff, but why? But how did they not see that when they were designing it? Is kind of what I'm pointing towards. Like,
Yes.
why?
Yes.
Why? Like, it's almost like, was there a pocket of like a few years where they were completely oblivious to emotion? Because like anytime outside of that pocket that those were made, people look at it and like, that's fucking creepy.
Yes,
What is it
absolutely.
about that stuff? Like
Well,
I've been struggling for years to try to kind of pinpoint that. Like it's so repressed and creepy. Like
yeah.
how did
It,
that get through?
it's so funny because the fact that it is creepy is exactly why I personally like it so much.
Sure.
But I have definitely noticed, like I was saying earlier, like the Smug Pig Vintage account that I have, like I try to only follow like other vintage accounts and or like artists that I like. And but I follow a lot of people there's a huge vintage Instagram community. And
Mhm.
I have definitely found that with a lot of these creepy pieces, people more in our age bracket, like
Mhm.
Gen X and millennials,
Mhm.
see the creep factor.
Yes.
And meanwhile, and that's why we like it.
Yes.
And meanwhile, and I think that like a lot of that is why like some of the media that like we grew up with, like for instance, like Ren and Stimpy, like that stylistically, I think Bob Camp was really like honing in on that creep factor from that time period, because there is sort of like a 1950s-esque design style in like in Ren and Stimpy.
Sure.
And it's like ramped up intentionally,
Yes.
and I feel like people our age get it and like it for that. And then I have seen so many people who are in the vintage Instagram community who are more in like their 60s or 70s, and they'll see these same exact items, these same faces, and they'll say things like, "Oh, isn't he darling?" And I'm like, "What? No, he has done murders. Look
Right.
in those eyes. Like,
Yes.
no, he's scary." And I mean, he's scary, and that's why I like him. But like, and then I've definitely seen like, older people in the community who like, when you point out how creepy something is, like they're like, "Oh no, no." And it's like, no, it is. Like, how are you not seeing that? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know what that is. If those, and I wonder too, if the designers saw it or not. I maybe
Yeah.
the designer saw it and we're intentionally like fucking with the public in some way.
Right.
Like the Sistine Chapel, like all
Yeah.
the fuck
Yeah.
yous in the Sistine Chapel, like that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like I wonder if that was an intentional seeing what they could get away with sort of a thing.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, that is so accurate that so many things from very much so, like I would say like the 40s, 50s, and 60s have just these really terrifying faces. And that's sort of a running theme, particularly with the holiday stuff. I mean, with Halloween, it makes sense, but with the Christmas stuff, there's some really unsettling Christmas
Yes. It's like
material.
like a forced joy. And by the sense that it's like forced is what makes it oppressive and kind of just macabre and I said sinister before, that pretty much nails it, but it's
Yeah.
twisted. Like it's not, it's an illusion of joy, which is so scary to me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I wish we recently went to our storage unit, and so all of the Christmas stuff finally made it to the storage unit. I wish I had left a Santa or two here. I'd love the Santas are my favorite and probably the creepiest, and some of them are really big. They're like
Yes.
like a 2.5 foot tall stuffed Santa, but they've got rubber or composite faces,
Uh-huh.
and they are just really horrific, and I absolutely love them. I actually my there's a running joke that I'm not allowed to go on eBay when I've been drinking. Like I said, like I generally speaking try to find these things like in the wild, but this was I think it was, yeah, it was summer of, oh, it might have been last summer. I was online in like July, like something like June or July, and I had been, I was like 2 scotches deep, and just like scrolling through eBay and
Dangerous.
found oh god, so dangerous.
Dangerous terrain.
Apparently,
Yeah.
it's dangerous because I ended up buying a lot
Uh-huh.
of I think in total 11 creepy Santas. And there were some that were only like 6 or like 10 inches
Huh?
tall, but like the vast majority of them were like 2 feet tall. And so the box was like 2.5, it was like a 2.5 foot cube,
Same
like
seller?
when it came.
Same
Just
seller.
Oh yeah. It was a lot. It was one lot.
Oh, cool.
Yep. Yeah, one lot of Santas. And I mean, I got it, like generally speaking, one of those guys in the Christmas season could sell for easily like $100.
Yeah.
And I got 11 of them, including, I think it was like 7 really big ones for, I think it was like $80 or something like that, including shipping.
That's cool.
And
Nice
so,
score.
yeah, I was psyched, but my husband was like, what did you bring into our house? Like, what is this? And then like
did you bring to our doorstep?
Yeah, exactly. And like I like set them all up so they were all in like a big pile on the end of the couch. And they were like they were like right, like I had to set them up like the couch is like up against a wall. And so they were like on the arm of the couch, kind of like facing towards the couch, but it was like the side of the couch that my husband always sits on, and they would like fall onto him. And he was like, you gotta get these fucking Santas out of here.
Are you into gnomes? Isn't that a weird question? Have you been asked this? That sounded so weird coming out of my mouth. I've never said that. Are you in? You know what I'm talking about? Like the garden gnomes? Have you gotten into that area yet?
No, I haven't, which is interesting because I was very into David the Gnome, the cartoon. Okay, so David the Gnome was a Canadian cartoon. There's literally only, I think, like 1 or maybe 2 seasons, and it ran on Nickelodeon like fucking like midday or something in the very early 90s. And I have found that people like, so I was born in 85, and I have found that people just slightly older than me and people just slightly younger than me have no idea what David the Gnome is, but people like within like a 3-year span, like, either a year younger than me, a year older than me, like we all know what David the Gnome is. And it was basically this like, he looked exactly like a lawn gnome. He had like a little blue like tunicate and then like a big red hat, and he was friends with a fox in the forest, and he had like a little dumpling of a wife, and like it was just
this guy. He looks like a gnome.
Yeah, exactly, yes. And it was just a very like heartwarming cartoon about like this gnome helping woodland animals. And I remember it so distinctly from my childhood, loving that TV show.
Yeah.
And no, have not gotten into the gnomes. No.
Probably better off.
Yeah. And one more thing. I don't need one more thing to start collecting.
What are you currently looking for? Is there anything that you're on the hunt for right now?
No. No, again, I mean, there's so many things that like I see and I really like, and but I find that if there's something in particular that I really want, then I will end up talking myself into buying it. Usually I'll still find a deal in comparison to what like the typical rates are, but it will be more than what I would generally be willing to pay for an item. So I try to corral myself to, okay, you're only buying things that like speak to you when you bump into them in the wild. So like for instance, on my birthday, I mentioned before that my husband and I went to the Elephant's Trunk flea market, and I didn't have anything in particular in mind, but just generally, Pyrex, if there was a piece of Pyrex that I really, liked. And so I saw so this here, so this is a mixing bowl that would be in the same kind of line as these ones back here. So this is a 400 series. So this is a 403. So this is called the rainbow set. And the rainbow set came in a few different colors. So there was, funny enough, it didn't come in like a rainbow pattern either, like this. There was no rainbow like this, nor were like the stripes in a real rainbow. It was just like kind of like nicknamed rainbow. So there it came in like a yellow, like a pale yellow, and it came in like a tan color, and it came in like a blue kind of color. And so the pink is the rarest, and for whatever reason, I think maybe because they were used more often, the bigger bowls than the little bowls. Bigger bowls of any set tend to be harder to find because probably a lot of them got broken, or probably dishwasher damaged,
Right.
So for whatever reason, the rainbow sets didn't come in the full 4. They stopped with the 403. So there's no
What?
4, there's no 404 in any of the rainbow sets. And so
Okay.
this is the biggest of the pink ones. So the pink ones are the rarest, the hardest to find for rainbow, and the 403 is the hardest to find of the pink ones.
And you have one. That's it right
yeah,
there.
and so yeah, so we were walking around the elephant's trunk, and I'd been really, I had already seen a bunch of Pyrex that I was in my price range, and I was like, no, I don't need that. It's all right, we're good. And then I saw this from like across the aisle and just like beelined right for it. And these are currently going, like, like I was saying earlier, like the Pyrex prices are just absolutely outrageous these days. And so if you were to go on eBay and look at the recently sold for this piece, it's not rare enough that, I mean, I found like 6 that were recently sold between April and May. But they're all in the like $250 price range for the one bowl.
What do they retail like a brand new one? Aren't they 250 anyway?
Well, yeah, in the 50s, yeah, for sure, when they were originally released.
What are new ones?
So the new ones, so they don't do the patterns anymore. Pyrex hasn't done patterns since the like mid 80s, early to mid 80s. And I'm not a big fan of the 80s patterns to begin with, but modern Pyrex is different than the vintage Pyrex. It's definitely back to what we were talking about earlier, about lower quality of production in modern items, and that combination of trying to hit larger profit margins and simultaneously maybe a bit more planned obsolescence. Old Pyrex had borosilicate in it. The glass was meant to be meant to hold up against temperature fluctuation. So it was intentionally advertised as being able to go from like the refrigerator to the oven and back again, kind of a thing, without that temperature change causing the glass to break. And so the borosilicate was part of that, that ability to be able to handle that. And also too, within some reason, be able to be beat up a little bit without breaking immediately. And so, like I was saying, like if I were to, take this bowl and drop it on the ground, it would break into like a couple big shards.
Got it.
Or a couple big chunks. So in the I believe it was the mid 80s, right around the same time period that they stopped making the colored Pyrex, the patterned Pyrex. It was either in the mid 80s or the early 90s that they for profit margins, they cut out the borosilicate. And so the glass, now a modern piece of Pyrex, anywhere from the 90s forward, if you break a piece of modern Pyrex, it's going to shatter into like a million pieces, just like, most glass you would expect to break. And, or like turn into that like glass dust, that's just so terrible to try to clean up and make sure that your pets or whatever aren't, walking through glass dust in a week or some shit. So, I mean, modern Pyrex, I mean, so these pieces, all of the Pyrex patterns were made for limited runs. Some of them were for like upwards of a decade, or maybe even like spanning a couple decades, but they all were limited runs. So you can't get like these kinds of Pyrex patterns are just not available these days. You can get, they have started, the company has started recognizing the appeal of Pyrex. And so in recent years, they have started sort of like releasing patterns that are nodding to their vintage patterns, but it's still on clear glass, and they'll do like a little colored pattern. I know they recently released like a whole Star Wars line with like like Baby Yoda on it and stuff like that. And so they've been doing some stuff like that for a little bit now, but it's not this kind of stuff. So these pieces are of a time and place that you can't get a modern version of these. I've got to remove this cat. He's being
so I actually have 2 questions. First off, was there a collector culture of Pyrex? I don't mean women who got the whole set, or homemakers, let's not just say women, homemakers, or just people who got, chefs or whatever, people who got the whole set. But were there people who got the whole set back then and didn't use them? Like, were there collectors of Pyrex back then even?
I don't think so. Not in the way that you would see it today. So one of the things that I really enjoy collecting in general is like the things that I like best tend to be the things that were in their heyday marketed towards the working class people. And it is sort of, I don't know if it's ironic or if it's, unfortunate that these items that were meant for the working class are now like, commanding these exceptionally high prices,
Sure.
in the modern era. But, these pieces were not like, a lot of collectors who are interested in the same kind of things that I'm interested in, like, we don't care so much about like the fine china and stuff like that. Like, those things don't interest us. The things that were being marketed towards like the upper class, like these were like lower class, middle class, like these were the working class people that got these items. And like, some of them, like the limited releases and the promo pieces, like they might have been a little bit more of a splurge, but they were still very accessible. And so I think that in general, when we see these pieces that aren't dishwasher damaged, that are in pristine condition, I think either they just weren't getting used for whatever reason, and not in a, I need to keep this pristine because I'm collecting it sort of a way, but more of just like a, well, I've got this bowl here. Why am I wouldn't use that bowl, but my great aunt Joan gifted it to me for my wedding. So I also don't feel good about getting rid of it. And so it just sits in a cabinet for, 40 years until somebody like me comes along and, picks it up at the estate sale kind of a thing. So I don't believe that there was a collector culture, or at least not a widespread collector culture. I think these were really pieces that were meant to be workhorses in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And along the same lines, so I don't as aggressively collect jadeite, but jadeite actually, and again, this is one of those unfortunate things that these were really meant for. So this is a jadeite cup that I have. So yeah, so jadeite, I really love jadeite. Martha Stewart unfortunately blew up the jadeite scene back in I think 2000 or 2001. She did like a whole spread on her jadeite collection, which is quite large. And and she has since started producing jadeite with her name on it, like modern jadeite. But yeah, jadeite has become barely touchable these days. But these were originally, so are you familiar at all with milk glass? So milk glass. So if you go into basically any thrift store, you can find milk glass. It's like opaque white, frequently vases. You'll see it's called hobnail. But when a vase has lots of little circles on it, little bumps all over it, and it's white and it's opaque white and it's clearly from the 40s. That is milk glass.
Oh, okay.
So these were jadeite was originally started in the Great Depression, specifically marketed towards the working class, and it was meant to be a way to kind of try to cheer people up a little bit. What they were doing was they would make the batches of milk glass, but they would take green glass bottles, recycle green glass bottles, like beer bottles and stuff like that, and they would crush up the green glass and put it into the milk glass mixture. And so it would reheat and melt, and then it would tint the milk glass to be this sort of creamy, minty jadeite. And so that's why so you'll actually see the items that can be called jadeite have quite a bit of variation in the color, and sometimes even within one piece. This one doesn't really have it, but sometimes in one piece you'll even see a little swirl of a slightly different color, because of that inconsistency of they were just throwing green glass bottles in, and that might have been a wide variety of green color that was getting added to, and then different companies were doing it in different ways. but like this one is Fire King. Fire King was another really big, like a lot of the mugs that I have behind me, these are mostly Fire King mugs back here.
Is that the manufacturer?
Yeah, Fire King, it was like Pyrex was one manufacturer, Fire King was another manufacturer, Glasbake was another manufacturer. These were, again, this was made to, you could actually pick these up, I believe, at like the gas station or something like that. It was like the kind of thing where you'd like piece together your set over time.
Yeah.
And now they're like untouchable.
What year does that one that you have that you're showing me? What year?
So this is probably like 1940s.
Yeah. Do you use that, or is that just pure?
No, that's I mean, for me, I do use like these Fire King mugs. So for me, like if I'm drinking a hot beverage, like I prefer something with like a little like thicker wall.
Yeah, me too.
So like, so you can kind of see the thickness on that wall versus like the thinness of like the.
I mean, these are literal diner mugs, which is so great.
Oh yeah. And which so there's a whole line of jadeite, Fire King jadeite, that was like the diner ware line, and they're so heavy. Yeah. And they're even more untouchable than like a lot of jadeite. Like they are in such high demand. Like the big heavy jadeite plates, bowls, mugs, that like diner ware is like very hard to come by.
Do you think there's some like hidden storage unit from some old bygone closed down Sears Roebuck where there's just a mother load of dead stock stuff of this somewhere?
Okay, so do we have time for a story?
Yeah.
Okay, so these guys right here.
I was hoping to get to these.
This is an incredible story. So this is their box right here. So these are Galaxy Spaceman. So this was a company I have a cat like really trying to get my attention. Buddy, you got to back off. This was a company in outside of Baltimore, Maryland. It's so mysterious. Nobody really knows exactly what happened. So basically, these came up on my radar probably about 5 years ago. I started seeing them here and there in like, random like Pinterest boards of vintage stuff or whatever, like, but before I started my Instagram account, I had a personal Instagram account, and there were a number of vintage accounts I followed on that. So like I'd see, just random here and there, and I could find them on eBay. And usually when I found them on eBay, it was like, so this box, you could get the box, it holds 12 bottles, and I would see it would be like $100. I was like, all right, well, one day I will snag one of those boxes. It was relatively frequently I could find like one box on eBay, and that was it. And I was like, well, one day, when we have space, when we buy a bigger house and I have more room to actually display something like that, I will buy a box. And the story behind these is that this company was way ahead of their time. The company was called Space Foods Company, and their idea was basically Soda Stream. It was at home soda making. Mm-hmm. So this was these bottles, which also too, when I used to see them online, I thought they were like maybe about 2/3 of the size of what they turned out to be. Like these are so huge. This is like as big as my head. Like they're just so big. And so these would be filled with various soda syrup.
Gross.
And then you would be making soda at home.
Those syrups must have been so gnarly. Yuck.
So here's the thing. They never got made.
Oh.
So the company, the boxes are marked 1953, which, the atomic age, the space age was like, right on the cusp. Like they were so ahead of their time in so many different ways. Like, at home soda making, like shit, what's that? That's only like 10, 15 years old. Like we haven't been doing that long.
Right.
And, they were on the very cusp, the very beginning. Like imagine, if I mean, we went to the moon in 69. Like, imagine if this had come out in like 65. Like, they might
Yeah.
have done immensely well.
Yes.
You know, but this was 1953. And these, I mean, these bottles are so goddamn
They're
gorgeous.
insane.
So there's a whole Roy G. Biv of, hold on, yeah, there's the bottle
Oh,
right
wow.
there. Yeah,
Of all the
so
different flavors, naturally,
yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
Well, so that's the
Artificially,
interesting
yes.
thing is that they're actually like every color, it does not necessarily have their own individual flavor. So the dark blue was grape, the light blue, the dark red, and the ever elusive black. I do not have a black bottle, but those were all raspberry.
Uh-huh.
The yellow and the green were both lemon lime. The red was cherry and the orange was orange.
Yeah.
But they've got like, you know, a bunch of different colors and then like fewer flavors than they have colors. And then like, so each one of the bottles, so this guy's the dark blue guy is the asteroid commander, but then there's going to be, you know, a different, so the light blue is the space navigator.
Uh-huh.
And they've got like different, every guy's got a different logo. And I mean, he's got his hand on his hip over here.
Oh, and it's molded. Wow, that's
and he's
cool.
got and he's got, you know, a ray gun at his side, but then on this side he's actually holding the ray gun.
Cool.
And he's got a jetpack on his back. Like the amount of detail in these guys is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so they had this incredible idea way ahead of their time. They had this incredible packaging. The box is amazing. Like the box art is so gorgeous and unique. And they went under, from what everybody can tell, because there's just no paper trail. From what everybody can tell, they went under before they ever made and put out any product into the world.
Wow.
And then inexplicably, their warehouse remained filled with these bottles. So this was 53, remained filled with these bottles until the warehouse was sold in, I believe it was 77.
Uh-huh.
It was 75 or 77. And the person who bought the warehouse didn't know these bottles were in there. And then I don't know what he was doing with the warehouse that then he didn't clear them out or move them in some way, but then they just continued to sit in the warehouse. And you know, every once in a while a box would make it out into the world, and that's why I started seeing them a little bit here and there. Like about 5 years ago was when I started to like get them on my radar. And then it was actually in the very beginning of this year. So Joe Retro is the Instagram page. Joe Retro, she is a vintage store down in the Baltimore, Maryland area.
Mm-hmm.
And she linked up with that gentleman who bought the warehouse in the 70s. His grandson now is the owner of that warehouse. And she has started like getting little waves of them and selling them out to the vintage community. And somebody in the vintage community who I've become friends with, who has like a really good following on her page, she purchased a set and posted it up. And I immediately was like, oh shit, it's now or never, you know, because it's one of those things, like, you know, like I was saying with the Pyrex, like for so long, it was so easy to collect Pyrex because you could just find it in the thrift stores all the time. Even rarer pieces, you could just come across random shit in good condition. And now it's become so much harder due to the pandemic and all of these, you know, new pandemic collectors who were sitting around their house with nothing to do and money to blow. And, you know, so I pretty quickly was like, if I don't pull the trigger on one of these sets right now, I will end up regretting it the way I wish that me 10 years ago was buying all the Pyrex on eBay that I wasn't buying, you know? Like I have wanted these for like 5 years now, and I just kept pushing, you know, kicking that can down the road.
Yes.
Now's the time.
Well done. Bravo. They look great.
Thank you.
Do you ever intend to fill them? No way, right?
Oh God, no. So they actually, so that's the other thing too. So the top
Uh-huh.
actually has a slot in it so that after you used it, you could then use the bottle as a bank.
Amazing.
Like I just, and there, the slot is still unopened. I ended
That's
up,
killer.
yeah. So, Ryan, who, his Instagram is Space Foods Company. He's the owner of this warehouse now. And he found, so there was actually like an ingredients sticker and like like how to make the syrup sticker that would go right here, and they never even got put on the bottles. Like he ended up finding relatively recently, like within the past couple of months, he found like a number of like sacks of them, and
Like
then
uncut
now,
sheets of stickers.
no, they're not uncut, they are cut, and they're like glued, but it's the kind of glue that you'd have to wet, to
Sure.
apply.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, I've seen some people now purchase those and actually apply them to their bottles. I'm like,
Oh, I would never do that.
I know, right? Yeah, I bought a stack of stickers, and they just kind of hang out with the spacemen. So yeah, but that's I don't know if there's a warehouse somewhere sitting full of jadeite.
There's got to be
But
somewhere.
man, this is such an intriguing story to me.
Yes.
Like like I've become obsessed with these because it's just so mysterious. And I mean, like there are so many things, collectible items from like, the earlier like turn of the 20th century or beyond that like, well, record keeping was shoddy or whatever. This is 1953. What the fuck happened?
Incredible.
What happened to these people?
Yes. Right.
Like, why didn't it work? Like the only thing I can come up with is they must have been the worst business people ever, because like, I mean, they had such a good idea. The packaging is incredible. The box is incredible. The idea was so ahead of its time that they were like, again, right at the cusp of like sci-fi and the space age and the atomic age. And like they could have and should have been, we should have all grown up knowing what this was.
Totally.
And instead, we're all just finding out this year.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? That's insane.
We're on an alternate timeline where that doesn't exist. The other
Yes.
timeline where that exists, it's the utopia.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Well, I guess we can't blame that on the Hadron Collider, right? Because that was made way post 53. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things I feel like we can blame on the Hadron Collider, but not this one.
So the other question I had was, in modern day, are there like when Pyrex drops like a new collection, like new 2022, do they sell out immediately?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe so. I mean, like, like I mentioned earlier that they did like a well, I guess it would be a Disney collab now, but like a Star Wars, pattern that they had where there were like, little Millennium Falcons and Chewbacca's and C-3POs like around the bowls. But they also too, it's more like they don't really do like the mixing bowls anymore. It's all really just kind of like the like storage, like the food storage type stuff now, like the better quality Tupperware, basically, where you've got like a glass bowl with the like Rubbermaid type top. And so I believe that those were, I don't think it was only through Costco, but I know those were available at like Costco. Like that Star Wars set. And I mean,
that
it
stuff
probably
beneath you? Are you like above that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the funny thing is like I love Pyrex and I love Star Wars. I have like a whole bunch of Star Wars toys and collectibles. But yeah, I don't know. I think I don't avoid all modern stuff. I try to, when possible, buy vintage over modern for most things if I can.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, so for instance, with the Halloween stuff, like I really love Halloween stuff. And so I don't go to Target all year long. I don't give a shit, generally speaking, about big box stores, and sometimes Target has some really good Halloween stuff. So then like in like August, I'll get like wind of what like the like Target Halloween line looks like. And then I'll start like stalking my local Targets trying to like, so this last Halloween, they had this incredible blow mold that was like this really cute skeleton. I'm a sucker for blow molds, and this was like this really cute skeleton, kind of doing like, he had like a Max Fleischer kind of vibe about him
Yeah.
with like the pie cut eyes, and he had like a little bow tie, and he was in front of this like snot green like headstone, and he was just really fantastic. And then there was like another one that was this really cute sort of Casper-esque, again very Max Fleischer ghost
Hmm.
that you know had like a little bow tie and stuff too. And so like I got both of those guys. So yeah, like I will, but again, it's like if it's new and it has like a vintage flair and it speaks to me, then I'll pick up some new stuff. But generally speaking, you know, also too, I'm just trying to be like a little more eco-minded, and it's more like, well, I'm, you know, buying these older things rather than feeding into like the perpetual machine of, you know, end stage capitalism. And also to like maybe keeping some of these older pieces where I'm not necessarily buying them off of eBay and I'm not paying top dollar. I'm, you know, going into thrift stores and going into estate sales and stuff. Like I'm maybe keeping these items like out of the landfills, you know,
Yes.
like that's like that kind of multi-pronged attack of, well, maybe I'm being a little more eco-friendly by doing this with my life, as well as collecting something that brings joy to me too.
Yeah, there's something to that, having ethics when it comes to what you're consuming, what you're collecting, what you're keeping around you. You spoke about animism earlier. It also has an effect on you, like the mojo that the things that you surround yourself with is a real tangible thing, whether that be like it sparks a mood or contributes to a lifestyle. It really does have an energy to it, a spirit to it. So I totally get the fact that you don't just want to have mass-produced plastic stuff all over the place, or contribute to the economy of that. You know, there's a lot of
Yeah.
times I see things and it's like fake vintage looking, and it's like offensive sometimes. I get offended by some of that stuff, you know. But I also think sometimes that, you know, I'm always kind of thinking when I do see things in department stores or big box stores, I see things in some, and I'm always trying to kind of figure out what vintage is going to be, like the cool vintage is going to be 20 years from now. Like I'm always thinking that way too. So that's kind of like a weird game, like a nonstop kind of gear that's always kind of turning in my head, like thinking of like what a t-shirt's going to look like in 20 years, what you know, some type of picture or print that I can find now, that how that's going to age, that sort of stuff. Even like, you know, like toys, like you know, I'm into like Japanese vinyl, or even like just even some of like the, you know, I haven't really collected toys in a long time, but I'm always thinking like, oh, well, how is that going to look in 20 years? Is that going to look cool? Is that not going to look cool? So there's that component too with stuff that you might find at Target now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that this is actually something that I think about all the time, is like, what will be, you know, I'm now in my late 30s. What will be the things that, you know, so I'm in my late 30s, and things that were toys for me when I was a kid are now considered vintage. Like, you know,
Yes.
Gen 1 My Little Ponies, for instance.
Yes.
Like Gen 1 My Little Ponies are in high demand, and I still have all my Gen 1 My Little Ponies. I've got a big Rubbermaid container full of ponies. And because I was an only child and I was meticulous with my toys, they're all in fantastic condition.
Awesome.
And so a few years back, I was like, oh shit, like ponies are, you know, popular again,
Yeah.
and these are worth something. Like I'll sell my ponies. I've been lugging this Rubbermaid container around like my whole adult life. Like I'll sell them. And I got them out, and like you can so with ones that like the manes aren't as nice on, you actually can like shampoo and condition their hair to like
Uh-huh.
get it better. And so like the like people who are like really into My Little Ponies, they'll like condition the hair in particular, like try to like very gently like comb out the tangles. And then they'll use like so you take the wet hair and you twist it around like a pencil or something and like let it dry like that, and you
Uh-huh.
can get those like ringlets again
Oh,
of their
cool.
hair.
Yeah.
And so like I went through, this was like maybe 5 years ago now. And I went through, maybe, no, probably longer than that. And I went through that with like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 ponies. And then I was like, I can't get rid of my ponies. Like I
They
started
look
saying,
so
like,
good now.
oh, look how good they look. And I was like playing with like, dealing their hair and shit. Like it like brought me back to that emotion of the object and of like 5, 6 year old me playing with this exact object, not one that
Yes.
looked like it, but this one.
Yes.
And I was like, "Ah, I can't." And so yeah, so they're still, in the Rubbermaid container. But I think even in the 90s, toys were being made with um more care and higher quality material than they are even now. And so I wonder this all the time. Like, okay, so if I'm in my late 30s, then what will be the things from this era that will be the collector vintage commodities, when I'm in my 60s,
Yes.
and I don't know, man, because like everything is made so cheaply. I think if anything, I mean, first of all, we'll probably be so surprised by it. It'll be shit that we never would have thought of because maybe we don't even know that it exists because we're not into the modern toys right now.
Yeah.
And but I think that it, for me, I feel like it would have to be like the designer vinyls and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like the
For
things that
sure.
are specifically and intentionally being made in small batches.
Yes.
Whether that's like an intentional just to keep it so that there are only a few of them, or if it's because it's one artist and they can only make so goddamn much,
Yes.
like.
Yes.
So I feel like, to me, I feel like that's what's going to be collectible. But who knows, man? It could be some crazy like Bratz dolls or shit. I don't know. Who knows?
I joke with my wife that because it always ends up to be the thing that everybody throws away, and there's not enough. They're not around anymore. And I
Yes.
joke with my wife that it's going to be like the live, love, laugh signs. Like in 20 years, people are going to want those, or like the "but first coffee" T-shirts. You know what I mean? That's how like.
Oh wow.
So stock
Yeah.
up now.
The Hobby Lobby, the Hobby Lobby decor. Oh boy. Oh no. Oh, that soulless bullshit. Oh, it makes me so angry.
Can you imagine the dead homemakers like in their grave if they could see you now? Like, she's getting all this Pyrex stuff that I used to like just make cobblers in. What is she, nuts?
Yes, absolutely. She paid what? Yeah. So like this bowl, like I was saying, like you can get this bowl on eBay. You can find it, but it's like $250, and it's there. And like I said, I was looking at the recently sold, and they were bids, and there were like 19 bids, and it was bid up to like $250, and there were like 6 of them. And I was lucky enough to, I walked up to it. It had a $45, like a piece of masking tape with like $45 written on it, and the guy was like, I'll do it for 40. And I was like, shut up and take my money. And but even me 5 years ago would have been like, you paid $40 for a piece of Pyrex? Like you're buying that at yard sales for $1. Don't pay $40 for one piece of Pyrex. But yeah, the prices are just they're going up, and there are so many people that are into these things that were just, these were the workhorses in the working man's kitchen.